A smart lock can make life so much easier. It can mean the difference between being locked out if you forget your keys and getting inside easily. But not all smart locks are created the same, and some of the pain points include glitchy software, defective units, and finicky operation, all of which I found in this product.
In this review, I spent several months with the Yale Approach lock and keypad, not because I was being thorough, but because I had so many problems with it. I'm going to show you what you get here and how it's supposed to work, as well as what this smart lock will allow you to do and what it won't. I'll go over the installation process and the different ways you can access the lock yourself or grant access to others. I'll wrap things up with both the pros and the cons and let you know if I think I can recommend the Yale Approach lock to you.
The Yale Approach lock is meant to replace the back portion of a regular keyed deadbolt lock. You'll remove the manual thumb turn on the back and replace it with the electronic version from Yale. Now, unlike some other smart locks, you will be keeping your door's front key slot or keyway, since this lock isn't designed to replace the front of your existing lock. The electronic Approach lock can be opened only with your smartphone or with your key. If you want to add additional unlocking options, like being able to use a numeric passcode, you'll want to add the Yale keypad. The keypad is a small battery-powered plastic pad that looks a bit like a remote control. You can mount the keypad near your door using screws or with the included adhesive. We'll get to the setup and the installation in just a sec, but start by downloading the Yale app and signing into or signing up for an account. I have to say the instructions, though they generally seem pretty good and include detailed videos, were not as complete as they could be.
For starters, the instructions won't tell you so, but if you have both the keypad and the locking mechanism, do not try setting up the keypad first. You need to install the Approach lock first and then connect the keypad.
To install the lock, you first need to open the back of it and pull the tab covering the batteries. A small light around the thumb turn should come on, and then you'll scan the QR code on the inside of the lock before you put it back together. Once you scan that code, the app should recognize your lock, and once the app has recognized it, it'll start guiding you through the installation instructions. You do have a handful of components inside the box, including the Approach lock and a set of adapters for your particular keyway, as well as a small plastic sensor called DoorSense. Don't lose this because you're going to need it soon. First, you'll need to remove your old thumb turn for your lock. It should just have two screws holding it onto the keyway, and once you've removed the back, you'll screw the back plate of the lock onto the back of the door using the screws you just removed from your old lock. Tighten them up and make sure the lock is lined up correctly on your door. Then take a look at what's called the tailpiece, which is a small mechanism inside the lock. There are different adapters for different types of tailpiece, so choose the one that matches your lock, then fit it over top of the tailpiece. Now it's time to attach that rear motorized mechanism, and it should fit easily over the tailpiece. Once you've done that, you can check to make sure the thumb turn moves the lock properly, and if so, you're all good. The next stage of installation involves installing the optional DoorSense sensor, and this little magnet will tell you if you've accidentally left your door ajar. The sensor gets attached next to the lock on your door frame, and you can use screws or adhesive. I had trouble getting this piece configured and had to go through the configuration process twice, but after my second attempt, I was successful. Next order of business should be to get your Wi-Fi hub connected. My Yale Approach lock came with a device called the August Connect, which is meant to be a Wi-Fi hub that should allow wider connectivity for your lock. Again, I followed the steps in the app to get connected, but I was met with an error message. This device also took a couple of attempts before it was properly connected. Next up, if you opted to use the Yale keypad, you will need to set that up. This also proved really troubling for me, and I got repeated error messages. After about 7 attempts at setting it up and adding it to the app, I just couldn't get it connected, so I actually put it away for about 2 weeks before trying again. With fresh eyes, I tried another 2 or 3 times and still had no success. I decided to give it one last try, and this time I tried pressing a small reset button in the face of the lock device with a paper clip. When I went through the process again to set it up, the app miraculously saw it.
In hindsight, I think what happened was that when I unboxed and attempted to set up the keypad here first, it tripped something in the app that prevented it from being set up correctly. My advice to you would be, if you're attempting to add the keypad and it doesn't set up correctly after just a couple of attempts, go right to that reset procedure and see if that helps speed things along. Now, the last thing I'll say about the keypad here is I do find it extremely cheaply made. It's almost entirely made of very lightweight plastic.
Before I even had it installed, the tiny clip that holds the back of the keypad in place had already broken away when I was trying to put it back on. Yale's engineers should redesign this immediately.
Your final step will be to install the keypad on a smooth surface within about 8 feet of your lock. When choosing a location, you do need to be able to access the bottom of the keypad in the future to replace the batteries. But with my keypad already broken, with the little battery door already broken away, I don't have high hopes for the future of this device when the batteries eventually do run out. And speaking of batteries, that was the next issue I dealt with. After only about 2 days of use, the keypad was completely dead. I replaced the batteries with a fresh set and the same thing happened. It drained them in just about 2 days. Now, at this point, I was losing faith big time, so I reached out to Yale for a solution. The company agreed that I might have a faulty unit, and they did send me a replacement.
But my troubles weren't over yet. When I went to set up the replacement, I kept getting error messages that the lock couldn't be found after multiple tries. It was back to Yale customer service, which eventually determined that the original lock was still somehow registered inside the app. They deleted it on the back end, and then I tried the setup process again, and finally it worked. Now, through the worst of my installation troubles, it was time to get to know the lock, how it works, and what it can do. Using the Yale app, you can just tap on your phone screen to lock or unlock. I will say there is both a delay between tapping the screen and getting the lock to engage, and many times I'd have to tap the app 2 or 3 times before it would actually work. The app will also always show you the current status of the lock, as well as the door if it's open, closed, or ajar. Let's move on to how to use the keypad. If you want to wake up the lock, you need to press the Yale logo button at the top of the pad. The keypad should light up, and then you can just punch in your code. You'll want to create access codes for family or guests, and you can do this in the app by choosing the user's icon at the bottom of the app screen. The interface here is kind of clunky to add a new user, and it's not always obvious what to do next or how to save the codes you generate, so take your time. Then after a couple days, I realized something else, that there is no simple lock button on the keypad.
If you want to lock your door using the keypad, you first need to type in your code. Using that code will essentially switch the lock status from locked to unlocked or vice versa. I also realized, though, that there is really no good way to tell at a glance from the keypad if the lock is engaged or open. Other smart locks I've tested have a small light or a colored emblem that's red if the door is locked and green if it's open, which can be very handy at a glance. The Yale Approach lock can also use geofencing to unlock your door when you return home. And I do say unlock specifically because there is no geofencing option for it to lock the door when you leave the area.
Instead, you have to enable what's called auto lock, which will automatically engage the lock after a set number of minutes, from about 10 seconds up to 30 minutes.
Now, I find this really maddening. The beauty of geofencing is that, just like another lock I recently reviewed, if your phone is with you, the lock is going to automatically lock your door when you leave the area and then unlock it for you when it detects your phone returning. To only offer this when you get back to the area really seems like a major half measure.
Even so, I did enable this feature just to test it out. Maybe not surprisingly at this point, I'd say it was only effective about a third of the time. More often than not, I'd end up standing out front of my door waiting for the lock to disengage automatically and then end up having to fish for my phone and use the app to trigger it. This feature doesn't seem like it's ready for prime time, and the lines and lines of exceptions and things to know disclaimers inside the app about it doesn't bode well either.
Overall, I have to say I am not at all impressed by this lock option. On the whole, it feels like a lot of corners have been cut for no good reason, and the lock is only marginally effective. Let's go over both the pros and the cons anyway, so you can see how I made my decision.
On the pro side, the motorized lock mechanism in particular feels sturdy and fairly durable, and the way this lock is built does give you options for how you want to install it and use it. For starters, it allows you to continue to use the keys you already have while automating the locking mechanism. It also offers you the opportunity to just use the Yale app for access or purchase the additional keypad if you want to use passcode access. You can place the keypad almost anywhere in front of your house as long as it's within about 8 feet of the lock. The installation process was easy, at least when it came to the physical installation. When it comes to the downsides, there are quite a few that are going to prevent me from recommending this lock. For starters, I found the construction of the keypad in particular to be really cheap and flimsy. That it broke before I'd even installed it, I think speaks to how very poorly made it is. I had several problems with the setup of both the locking mechanism and the keypad, and while I will chalk some of that up to my attempt at setting up the keypad first, which I think confused the system, I'm not going to take all the blame because nowhere does it tell you this should be done in a certain order. I also had multiple problems, including a defective unit, and spent literal hours on troubleshooting and talking to customer service, and all the hassle really soured me on the product from the get-go. I was also really disappointed with the lack of full geofencing, since it is offered only on your return. If you want the lock to engage automatically when you leave, you have to do this by setting a timer. I also found the geofencing wasn't really effective, and it really only opened the door for me about 30% of the time.
In short, I'd give this lock only about a 5 or a 6 out of 10 because there are so many quirks, dislikes, and frustrations with it. For those reasons, I would say skip this product and choose a different brand. It sells for about $229 US, and you can get it at a lot of electronics retailers, including Amazon. And if you want to check out my absolute favorite smart lock these days that has replaced all of my old smart locks, you'll definitely want to see my full review of the Kwikset Halo Select, which for me has checked just about every single box when it comes to a smart lock. Not only does everything work as advertised, but it's easy to set up and install too. You can watch that review right now.